Hey everybody, what's going on, and welcome to Guns N' Roses Central, and we're back with another episode of Guns N' Roses True Story. Now, this has been an episode that has probably been pretty highly requested from you guys, and I wanted to do it given that the 25th anniversary of this tour is happening this year. So today we're talking about the Guns N' Roses and Metallica co-headlining stadium tour that they did back in the summer of 1992 all across North America. So on May 12th, 1992, both Lars Ulrich and Guns N' Roses guitarist Slash held a press conference at the Gaslight in Los Angeles to basically announce that both Metallica and Guns N' Roses would tour together that summer, starting in Washington, D.C. at RFK Stadium on July 17th, and they would play a series of shows that would eventually end in early October at the Kingdome in Seattle. Now, it was originally envisioned by Axl Rose that Nirvana would actually be opening for both bands. However, Kurt Cobain turned down Guns N' Roses' invitation to open for both bands, and instead Faith No More opened a majority of the shows. And towards the end of the tour, Faith No More left the tour to fulfill other touring commitments, and instead Motorhead and Body Count opened for Guns N' Roses and Metallica. And while the tour was a huge financial success, Guns N' Roses and Metallica played over 25 cities. There were some cities where ticket sales were a bit slower than expected. Orchard Park in the US, as well as Los Angeles. Both cities couldn't break the 80% mark in terms of tickets sold. So Orchard Park only sold 76% of the tickets available, and LA only had 78% of the tickets sold, while a lot of other places they played were usually 90% or higher, or even 100% sold. And the purse for each show was about $750,000. That would be split between the bands. Now, Metallica knew that Guns N' Roses were infamous for going on late, and Metallica was all about business. They didn't want to lose money, so they actually volunteered to go on ahead of Guns N' Roses and have Guns N' Roses finish the show each night. Now, this caused Guns N' Roses to go on late almost every single night. There was, I think, one or two shows where they seemed to go on stage on time, but people have to remember that because Metallica had their own stage and then Guns N' Roses had their own stage, the actual downtime to set up Guns N' Roses' stage after Metallica was done was around 2 hours. According to Slash's autobiography, which came out in 2007, he claims that Guns N' Roses blew through 80% of their earnings from the tour, largely because they'd go on stage late each night, so they'd be paying fines, they'd be paying overtime fees, and then on top of that, Axl would be throwing extravagant parties after each concert. Now, there were some cities that Guns N' Roses and Metallica really wanted to play together, but there were some cities that just didn't want them showing up because of how late the bands would go on stage and because how big of an issue it could be with public safety. So there was an article that got published on December 9th of last year about how Guns N' Roses and Metallica were going to play Ottawa, Canada. And at that time, the current mayor of Ottawa was actually a councilman, and basically Guns N' Roses wanted an exception for playing past the noise bylaw, which ends at 11 p.m. So Guns N' Roses wanted to play until 12:30, but there was a lot of concerns that public transit wouldn't be available after the show. You'd have a lot of people intoxicated, and getting home could be a safety issue. And it was actually world news. The actual councilman got on Entertainment Tonight, and there was a huge media blizzard. And he got a lot of phone calls, about 700, mostly from teenagers. And they interviewed a guy named Dan Halen, who was then the host of the 54 Rock's morning show, which is devoted to, rock music in Ottawa. And he recalled the event saying, "Our phone lines were jammed starting at 6 a.m. We decided to drop the music this morning and let them vent their anger. A lot of Guns N' Roses fans are 25, 35, or 40. They're tax-paying working people. And basically the knives were out. A lot of people in Ottawa went to council and dissed the actual counselor, with one angry fan describing him as a stuffed shirt for his stance. And basically his response was, "What I was doing was representing the people I represented, and that made me a stuffed shirt, so be it. I thought it was unreasonable, and there was no plan put in place to get people home, and there would be drinking. I was concerned." So at the first show in Washington, D.C. at RFK Stadium, Metallica's opening song, Creeping Death, was recorded for their documentary, A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica. So at the next Guns N' Roses show in East Rutherford, New Jersey, Axl actually apologized to the audience for going on late, and then he actually proceeded to do an impression of Izzy Stradlin and actually dedicated Double Talk and Jive to both presidential candidates, Bill Clinton and George Bush, which you guys can see here.
As I said, the new man on the rhythm guitar, Mr. Gilby fucking Clark. Suck my dick. You'd like somebody to be in the band that, I guess if he stayed in the band, we wouldn't fucking be here tonight, then would we? Dumbass. We'll do things according to Izzy's traveling schedule.
I don't want to make videos. I don't understand why we have to tour like this, Axel.
And then 3 nights later, when Guns N' Roses and Metallica played the Pontiac Silverdome in Pontiac, Michigan, Axl actually once again dedicated Double Talk and Jive to all the presidential candidates, and after Wild Horses, he actually apologized to Michigan fans for the cancellation of 2 shows the months before, and Axl actually threw up at the end of You Could Be Mine and had to leave the stage. He felt sorry for the poor performance, and the band played the song in full once again later on in the show. And the next night, Guns N' Roses returned to Axl and Izzy's home state of Indiana for a show at the Hoosier Dome, and Shannon Hoon of Blind Melon actually came out on stage and performed Don't Cry with the band. And then a few nights later, Guns N' Roses and Metallica played Pittsburgh, and during the show, Axl actually revealed to the audience that the original lineup for the tour was supposed to be GNR, Metallica, and Jane's Addiction, all 3 bands playing full sets. Now, I've never heard this verified by anybody else. Now, at a late July show following the Pittsburgh show at East Rutherford at Giant Stadium, this was an okay show for Guns N' Roses because Axl didn't seem like he was in a very good mood. In fact, the band played a rare performance of Rocket Queen during the Summer 92 tour, and for unknown reasons, Axl didn't sing a lot of the lines in Rocket Queen, and then towards the end of the show, Axl got hit by a cigarette lighter in the crotch during Knocking on Heaven's Door and basically walks off stage, and Duff finishes the rest of the song, but the show ends after Knocking on Heaven's Door, and the regular encore of Paradise City is not played. So it was later revealed that Axl had actually sustained damage to his vocal cords and had trouble singing for the show, but decided to continue on until he was hit in the crotch by the cigarette lighter, and then the next several shows of the tour actually had to be rescheduled. Following the rescheduled shows, the next show that went on was the August 8th show in Montreal, Canada, and this is a pretty infamous show. So Metallica frontman James Hetfield at that show suffered 2nd and 3rd degree burns to his left arm after mistakenly standing on a pyrotechnics blast during the opening of Fade to Black. So according to Hetfield himself, there was extra pyro in addition to the original pyro, and I got too close to the original pyro. So Metallica was forced to cancel the second hour of their show, but promised to return to the city for another show. And when Metallica was forced to leave the stage, the audience became increasingly restless waiting for Guns N' Roses. However, the shortened time between the sets did not allow for adequate tuning of the stage monitors, resulting in the Guns N' Roses members not being able to hear themselves. In addition to that, Axl Rose claimed that he had hurt his throat, causing the band to leave the stage early, and of course the cancellation led to a riot by audience members reminiscent of the riot that had occurred almost a year prior at a Guns N' Roses show in St. Louis. So Guns N' Roses' Montreal show lasted about 45 minutes or so. They played about 8 or 9 songs. Now at the end of the second last song, which was Double Talk and Jive, Axl told the crowd, "This will be our last show for a long effing time." And the last song of the night was Civil War. And after Civil War, Axl told the crowd, "Thank you, your money will be refunded, we're out of here." And then an announcer came on stage and told the crowd that the show is over. This time, the aggravated audience members took to the streets of Montreal, overturning cars, smashing windows, looting local stores, and setting fires. Local authorities were even barely able to bring the mob under control, and footage from the debacle was later included in the 1992 documentary A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica. Now, following this debacle in Montreal, 6 shows on the tour had to be rescheduled because of Hetfield's injury, and a show in Vancouver, Canada that was going to be held on August 17th had to be cancelled. And according to Slash's autobiography, following the incident in Montreal, Slash admitted that he could no longer look anybody from Metallica in the eye because of how humiliated he felt. And when U2 played Montreal several weeks later, U2 gave a little jab to Guns N' Roses, and Bono cracked a veiled Axl Rose joke, basically telling the audience, "What time is it? We gotta go." And on the VH1 documentary Behind the Music that was done for Metallica, the members of the band actually talked about the incident in Montreal. James Hetfield basically said that Axl could have been the hero of the day had he actually went on and performed like a blistering 3-hour set. And I sometimes wonder if the song Hero of the Day was actually written about Axl Rose or maybe somebody else. But even their bassist Jason Newsted said that after the Montreal riot, he went backstage and saw Axl smoking a cigarette and drinking champagne and complaining about his throat. And then the tour would resume in Arizona at the Phoenix International Raceway on August 25th, 1992, but James Hetfield would only be doing the vocal duties, not playing rhythm guitar. And former Metallica guitar tech and Metal Church guitarist John Marshall filled in for the rest of the tour on rhythm guitar while Hetfield continued to sing, and Metallica's performance of Nothing Else Matters during their performance in Arizona was recorded for their documentary, A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica. Now, going into the September shows that Guns N' Roses and Metallica had, this was around the time that the rivalry between Nirvana and GNR really exploded because of the altercation that happened at the MTV Video Music Awards on September 8th. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the Video Music Awards. I've got a separate video for that. But the week before the Video Music Awards at a show in Orlando that Guns were playing, basically Axl went off on alternative bands, including Nirvana, and then a week after the MTV Video Music Awards, Guns and Metallica were playing Toronto, Canada, and Axl actually burned a Nirvana cap on stage, and then the band did an instrumental jam of Smells Like Teen Spirit. So at a show that Guns and Metallica did in Denver back on September 19th of 1992, there was a moment in the concert where Guns N' Roses were playing Welcome to the Jungle, and something happened to Axl, and basically he walked off stage. And there was a story in the LA Weekly about what actually happened when Axl walked off stage. So this story comes from a book called Backstage Past by Barry Fay. He was a legendary Denver concert promoter, and he was asked in an interview with the LA Weekly about his favorite backstage story, and he said it was the Axl Rose story as told by Lars Ulrich. So like I said, guns were on stage. There was 48 to 49,000 people there. It's a big tour, and during Welcome to the Jungle, Axl just walks off, and the band just keeps jamming. And according to Barry, some fans got so pissed they actually took their Guns N' Roses shirts back to the merch stand and asked to have a Metallica shirt instead. So it turned out that Axl left the stage, got in his limousine, and left the site. So Barry basically called up the limo driver and told the guy, "You don't work for Axl, you work for me." And basically told him, if you ever want to see another effing dime of this company's money, you get the car back here. And basically said the only way that Axl gets out of the car is if he jumps out. And if he jumps out, you leave him in the street, but you get that car back here. And Barry was really pissed. He went and asked Lars Ulrich to come on stage and actually try to jam with the band, but Lars refused to. He said, "You bozos don't have enough money in your collective bank accounts for me to get back on that stage." So at that point, Barry left the dressing room, went to the parking lot, got out his .357 gun out of his glove box, and put it in his back pocket. So basically, he waited for Axl to arrive. So within a few minutes, the car comes back, Axl gets out and talks to his manager, Doug Goldstein. And basically, Barry called Doug Goldstein a glorified security guy. Basically, he used to do Guns N' Roses security, and then he took over his management. And he said Axl comes and talks to his manager and goes right up on stage and gets back into it. So basically, Barry ends up putting a bunch of his security guys and a couple Denver cops at the top of the stairs so that Axl can't leave the stage. And if Axl wants to leave the stage, the only way he's going to leave the stage is through the crowd of 50,000 people or so. And Barry claims that Lars tells a different version of the story. Lars's version of the story claims that Barry actually took out his .357 and held it to Axl's temple and said, "Get on that effing stage or you're going to die." Now, Barry claims the .357 never ever left his pocket, but who knows? I found this was an entertaining story nonetheless. Now, after September 21st, Faith No More actually left the tour to fulfill other touring commitments, and Motorhead and Body Count would open for both bands until October 6th, when they played their final show in Seattle. Now, their second last show of the tour was at the Rose Bowl in California, and for that show, Andrew Dice Clay, the comedian, actually opened for both Guns N' Roses and Metallica, and Andrew Dice Clay actually introduced Guns N' Roses before they took the stage. Now, in late September, Metallica and Guns N' Roses were going to be playing Oakland at the Oakland Coliseum, and this was around the time that Slash was about to get married to his first wife, Renee Saran. Now, Slash wanted Renee to sign a prenuptial agreement. They got into a huge argument on the phone. Afterwards, Slash ran into some old friends, and he ended up ODing on heroin and dying for 8 minutes. He actually went to the hospital and checked himself out and still played the gig that night. And at the last show of the tour, where Guns N' Roses were playing with Metallica in Seattle, Duff McKagan's family actually tried to stage an intervention with him. Basically what happened was Duff's brother picked up Duff and were going to take him basically to go see their mom. And as soon as they got through the door, Duff saw a bunch of people in the room and saw his mom and realized it was an intervention and basically bolted for the door and went back to the hotel. Following the actual tour, James Hetfield did an interview with Rolling Stone magazine in the spring of 1993, and the topic of the Guns N' Roses tour from the previous year had actually come up. So the interviewer asked, "There wasn't much normal about your summer tour with Guns N' Roses last year. In fact, in your nightly opening video, there's a shot of Kirk Hammett mooning the camera and saying, 'That's what I think of Guns N' Roses tour. What do you think of it?'" And James responded by saying that's Kirk's way of saying something without saying something. And he basically said, did I enjoy the tour? It was different. It was a good idea. We really had no idea what was going to come with it. They're a different type of band, and I use the word band loosely. It's a guy and some other guys. We were out to show people that there was something a little more progressive and hardcore than Guns N' Roses, and to go about it our way. But it was hard going on, dealing with Axl and his attitude. It's not something we'd want to do again. And the interviewer asked, there's one scene from the tour in the recent Metallica home video in which you were reading aloud passages from Guns N' Roses tour writer in a rather sarcastic voice. To which James said, yeah, Metallica humor. It doesn't really matter what the hell was on it. Just the fact that Axl had his own rider was funny. It's hard to grasp. What we saw, he had his own dressing room. I just didn't understand that. And later on in the interview, Rolling Stone asked, do you think Axl Rose should have gone on with the show no matter what in light of what happened to you? And James said, I'm a singer, I know how it is. If your voice is in bad shape but you've got shit to do, you're not in the mood. He was pissed off at the monitors or whatever. For some reason he didn't get enough volume, strained his voice, and it wasn't working for him. He threw a fit, and that was that. I was so disappointed in him because he could have won so many people over by continuing the show, and he went the exact opposite way and made things 10 times worse and jeopardized people's lives. There was a lot of unnecessary violence because of his attitude. He could have turned that into a great evening. Now, following this interview, Axl read the actual piece in Rolling Stone and saw the Metallica documentary, A Year and a Half in the Life of Metallica, and actually went on a rant at a show that Guns played in Sacramento in April of 1993. Now, this was the same show that Guns N' Roses had to cut short because Duff was hit in the head with a bottle, and Guns N' Roses had to end the show after that. And here's the clip from the actual show. Following the feud between Metallica and Guns N' Roses, years would go by until things would finally be patched up in 2006 when Axl was touring with his version of Guns N' Roses, and apparently he was sipping champagne with Lars Ulrich in Copenhagen. So there was a story in the New York Post that Lars Ulrich and his girlfriend, Danish actress Connie Nielsen, sipped champagne with Axl Rose until 6 a.m. at the NASA nightclub in Copenhagen that week. And later on in 2006, Lars actually joined Guns N' Roses on stage at a show they did in Oakland, California. He played Out to Get Me on drums, and there's audio available of that clip. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any video footage, and I've linked to it down below. Now, several years later, Guns N' Roses would release Chinese Democracy, and the first music video that was supposed to come out was for the song Better, and Lars Ulrich actually came out and said he's in the music video. There's a shot of him and Axl embracing backstage at some show, probably in Europe. Maybe it was the one that Guns did in Copenhagen back in 2006. Now, the video was never actually officially released by Guns N' Roses. However, it did leak online, and you can actually see the footage of Lars and Axl backstage briefly. And following the release of Chinese Democracy, the members of Metallica did several interviews where the topic of Guns N' Roses' new album came up. So James Hetfield did an interview with the Houston Chronicle where he talked about Chinese Democracy, and his quote was, "I haven't lost sleep waiting for it." So the Houston Chronicle asked, "You guys have an uneasy history with Guns N' Roses. Have you heard Axl's new record? Do you even care?" And James said, "I'll certainly listen to it, but I haven't lost sleep waiting for it. I thought we took a long time to make an album, but you know he's late for everything, so it makes total sense. We saw him play at a festival in Germany 2 years ago. He's a good frontman, he's eccentric, but all artists are. If they don't show that they're quirky, they're lying to you. They're either pretending they're not, or they're pretending they're an artist." So in 2009, Metallica got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they were doing press for the induction ceremony. And one of the questions they got asked was, on the topic of drama and tragedy, would you guys ever consider touring with Guns N' Roses again now that they're back out there? And drummer Lars Ulrich shook his head and mouthed no before becoming a little more diplomatic. He said, "As James was saying earlier, we're road dogs and we love to tour, so if that opportunity ever came up in the right situation, of course." To which James Hetfield added, we've learned to never say never because you don't know what hurdle or what great thing is going to be handed to you. He also said, "Actually, all four of us really like Chinese Democracy," continued Ulrich. "I think it's a great record. Who knows? We never say no to anything." And finally, guitarist Kirk Hammett chimed in by saying, "I think the question is, would they tour with us?" referring to Guns N' Roses. And in late 2008, Axl actually did a fan Q&A on the My GNR forums. And one of the questions he got asked was about Metallica. A fan asked, "Have you heard Metallica's new album?" To which Axl responded, "Yes, I like it." And in 2010, James Hetfield was doing an interview with an Australian journalist, and he actually handed James Hetfield Axl Rose's recent tour rider when Guns had played Australia. And James Hetfield had a couple comments to say about Axl. He said, "I've got nothing against Guns N' Roses. I mean, he's doing what he wants to do at this point. I don't know if there's much guns or roses in any of that, but it's Axl and he is Axl, and he has not changed or waned one bit, and I kind of respect that." And in 2016, Metallica was out promoting their new album, Hardwired to Self-Destruct. And basically, Kirk Hammett was doing an interview with the LA Times, and he spoke a bit about Guns N' Roses' reunion tour. He said, "Unfortunately, they've turned into somewhat of a nostalgia act, which to me is kind of sad." And he also talked about the importance of writing new materials, saying that, "I don't want to think we're trying to stay young by writing new stuff, but it makes us feel relevant. It makes us feel like we're still progressing." So that does it for my look back at the Guns N' Roses and Metallica tour, as well as their sort of semi-feud over the past several years. So let me know what your guys' thoughts are. Comment down below. As always, guys, hit the like button if you enjoyed the contents of this video. And be sure to hit the subscribe button if you love Guns N' Roses as much as I do. Thanks for watching, guys, and have yourself a good day.